Let's begin. We'll start by reading 1 Kings chapters 14. I'm going to read from verse 25 to 28. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, King Sheshonq of Egypt, the biblical Sheshonq, the pharaoh named Sheshonq here in the text, is actually Sheshonq the First. The Bible calls him Sheshonq, but his name is Sheshonq. He's Sheshonq the First. So let's take it from the top again. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, King Sheshonq the First of Egypt marched against Jerusalem and carried off the treasures of the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and the treasures of the royal palace. He carried off everything. He even carried off all the golden shields that Solomon had made. King Rehoboam had bronze shields made instead, and he entrusted them to the officers of the guard who guarded the entrance to the royal palace. Whenever the king went into the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the guards would carry them and then bring them back to the armory of the guards. 4 verses, and in these 4 verses, we're going to base our class around and bring some clarity to the text and also some corrections to the historical part of it. As I mentioned, the biblical Sheshonq is actually Sheshonq the First. Who was he? He was the founder of the 22nd dynasty in Egypt. This verse that we've read is referring to a military campaign that Sheshonq the First took to Canaan. This campaign is not only recorded here, it's not recorded in detail here actually in the biblical text, but is reported as a list of conquered towns on a wall in Upper Egypt, in a temple in Tanach. The temple of Amun in Upper Egypt. The temple of Amun at Tanach in Upper Egypt. When you zoom in, I'm trying to see whether we can look at a clearer picture. We see the inscription of Sheshonq the First. And these are list of places that he conquered. Okay. So we have the biblical text in the book of Kings telling us about something historical. We have extra biblical account of it on the walls of Egypt, the temple of Amun at Tanach in Upper Egypt. So now we can compare, we can reference back and forth and check if what the Bible is saying is accurate. Few questions that we would want to ask about this campaign. When did this campaign take place? Well, the widely accepted dating of the campaign is 926 BCE. And this date is based solely on the biblical reference. The date 926 BCE, which is a widely accepted dating, is based solely on the biblical reference. It makes me feel uneasy to actually take it to the bank, because from my experience, when it comes to historical data, and we're looking at a Deuteronomistic text, we would want to check to make sure that we are getting the dates right and is not theologically influenced. In doing that, we come to find out, which I will demonstrate, that the dating of First Kings of Rehoboam, the 5th year of Rehoboam, is a bit problematic, to say the least. It may have been, being nice, it may have been schematically arranged to fit the theology of the Deuteronomistic historian. I'll demonstrate that. Number two, the chronology of the 21st and 22nd dynasties in Egypt is quite complicated. And it allows a shift of several years backward or forward in the dates of Sheshonq the First. The chronology is complicated, so it's not straightforward. So you can either move it forward a bit or you can move it backwards. This is the second issue with the dating that the biblical text is giving us. Number three, in addition, it is not clear whether Sheshonq carried out his campaign in his early years on the throne or in his later years. It is not completely clear. With these 3 points, it means that the Sheshonq 1 campaign could have taken place almost any time in the mid to the late 10th century BCE. The truth of the matter is that one can hardly be more precise. These are the facts on the ground. So when the Bible gives us the date, this is the issue that we have. This is the data that we need to go through to figure out, did the biblical text get it correct? Or can we go outside of the text, use history, archaeology to determine where to place Sheshonq the First campaign? So now we see the difficulties that we have in trying to decipher when is this happening. The dates that the biblical text gives, I'm saying is problematic. Now, even in the Egyptian source, the chronology of the 21st and 22nd dynasty is also complicated. We don't know when the campaign started. Was it in his early years on the throne or his later days? We don't have that clarity. So we have to see, how do we reconstruct this and how do we decipher it to actually put things into perspective? We're going to do that by looking at the place names mentioned by Sheshonq the First or Sheshonq the First. And when we look at the place names, the places where he tells us on the walls in Upper Egypt, where he campaigned, we see that it represents an Iron Age reality. Why do I say that? Because it differs from place names, what they call toponyms, known from Egypt that date to the late Bronze Age. So you take the place names of the same territory And then the place names of the same territory from the late Bronze Age and then the Iron Age. Let's start Iron Age 1. And you will notice that the place names, toponyms, known from Egyptian lists that date from the late Bronze Age differs from the list that dates from the Iron Age one. Okay, so this is how we can actually start to decipher what date to put the happenings and see how it translates to where we are trying to get. Mr. CJ, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you with the statement. So these are the place names. We have Bethron marked by the star on the map. We have Gibeon. We have Arad. We have Zemaraim. We have Adama. We have Sukkot. We have Penuel. We have Mahanaim. We have Tiza, Rehob, Tanach, Megiddo, Bet-Shin. These are the major places. So what we see here, let me bring this other map so that you can look at both of them so you understand my statements here. What we see towns, the major towns. We see towns located in the Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley is up there by the Sea of Galilee. No. Along the international road in the Sharon Plain. You see where it says the coastal plain? We have Gaza, Jaffa. Okay. We have the area of Gibeon, which is north of Jerusalem in the highlands. You see where Jerusalem in the second map, Gibeon is north of Jerusalem. It's mentioned that Sheshonq campaigned there. And then we have the area in the Jabbok River and Transjordan, where you have Sukkot, Mahanaim, Penuel. They are around the Jabbok River, the Transjordan. And then where Arad is at the bottom, that is the Beersheba Valley, which is in the south. These are the places that on the list we are given that Sheshonq the First campaigned. Look at it the second time. The Jezreel Valley, towns are mentioned there. We have towns along the international road in the Sharon Plain. We have the area of Gibeon, which is north of Jerusalem in the highlands. It's mentioned. And then we have the area around the Jabbok River in Transjordan, where you have Penuel, Mahanaim, Sukkot. And then you have Arad, which is in the Beersheba Valley, which is in the south. So these are the places mentioned in Sheshonq's the First's list. Feast your eyes on it one more time. It's important. Okay. When we read 1 Kings, now knowing what we know here about the towns, the major towns mentioned, we come and we read 1 Kings 14. And we are told that this happened in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, who is the king in the south, correct? He's the king in the south, in Jerusalem. That brings about an issue, though. What is the issue that we see with the statement here in 1 Kings and the evidence on the ground? What is the problem with this list? Comparing the statement in 1 Kings 14 and then the evidence on the ground.
Rabbi, are they all northern territories?
Okay, that's good. You're correct, 100%. But I want you to word it differently.
So, Rabbi, I just say that to me, there's no Judaic territories there.
Correct. Jerusalem is missing from the list. Not only that, the entire Judean highlands is missing from the list. We are told that he marched against Jerusalem. But when we looked at the list on the wall, we don't see Jerusalem listed. Not only don't we see Jerusalem, we don't see any Judean highlands towns there mentioned. So we have to question and ask, what is going on? I can give a good argument. So I'm going to wear the Judean hat for 5 minutes. How would I argue this? That, Judah or Jerusalem or none of the highlands, towns in the highlands of the Judean highlands are mentioned. Yes, I have a very good argument. What would be my argument? Well, part of the list is damaged. So since part of the list is damaged, I can argue that the name of Jerusalem had originally been included, but was not preserved. I think that's a good argument. That's a solid argument, which I would be forced to agree with it. It is possible, now let me put on my northern hat, but not likely. The argument is possible, but not likely. Why do I say that? Well, in this inscription, on rows 2 and rows 5, it mentions places in the highlands to the north of Jerusalem, like Gibeon. That part do not have many damaged place names. So if you're able to mention Gibeon, which is just north of Jerusalem, why does he not mention Jerusalem on that row of list of territories conquered? So we have a good row that lists places north of Jerusalem, like Gibeon, but Jerusalem is not mentioned. No Judean city in the highlands is mentioned. That's one argument. So you mention a place north of Jerusalem, Gibeon, but you don't mention Jerusalem. And the argument is maybe it was mentioned somewhere else. I think it would make more sense to have mentioned it right there when they mentioned Gibeon, because it's just 10 kilometers. Also, number 2, no Judahite town in the Shephelah appears in the list. There's Judahite towns here in the Shephelah, if you look on the screen, but they are not mentioned in the list. Why is that? If you noticed, we mentioned in one of the classes how the Assyrian Empire was in a fast collapse due to pressures in the north and in the east. And after a century of unquestioned domination in the region by the Assyrians, they gradually abandoned their claim to the provinces of the West, creating a power vacuum. If you remember, where we have some Sammaticus the First fill that vacuum. We mentioned that as the Assyrians withdrew, the kingdom of Judah took advantage of the new conditions by expanding north and west into the area of the Shephelah, right here. Where is it? Right here. They expanded north because it had rich farmlands. So again, how come in Sheshonq the first campaign, no Judahite town in the Shephelah area is mentioned in his list? That's another question.
So this is why you were saying like they can push us forward or they can push us back, because like we're looking at this and it's like maybe Judah didn't even exist at this time or was recognized as a state or a country or what have you.
Correct.
But then at the same time, it's like if this is coming from the exiles, which I'm believing are the Deuteronomistic
Historian.
writers, yeah, historians, then it's kind of like I'm still conflicted. I'm still trying to like make it.
Correct. So we have questions. If these places existed, they were filled with these cities, why are they not mentioned? I mean, they don't get mentioned at all. And it's very convenient to say that the place that any Judahite city is mentioned is destroyed. But we have the places of the north. And then a place just 10 kilometers from Jerusalem, which is Gibeon, is mentioned. So why all these contradictions or problematic texts historically? Why is that? How come no Judahite town in the Shephelah as well? How come it does not appear in the list of Sheshonq the First? Why? Well, this is the reason. In the 10th century BCE, Jerusalem was no more than a small, poor highland settlement. It had no massive monumental constructions. This is Jerusalem. In the time of Sheshonq the First campaign, Judah was still a marginal, sparsely settled southern highlands group, political group. And it was ruled from a small settlement. It was made up of pastoral groups. So the picture that we have in the 10th century doesn't match what the text is telling us. The expansion to the Shephelah and then the Beersheba Valley seems not to take place before the second half of the 9th century BCE. This is indeed the moment when one can detect the first signs of statehood in Judah, like Mr. CJ was saying. So Judah was not a place that one will consider to campaign to. Why waste your time? because the poor material culture of Judah in the 10th century leaves no room to imagine great wealth in the temple, and certainly not wealth magnificent enough to appease an Egyptian pharaoh. Why waste resources and time to campaign against Jerusalem or Judah in the 10th century? It doesn't make any sense. Mr. Mark, please go for it.
Yeah. So yeah, the another question I have is the text in First Kings was very specific as to the results of this campaign by Sheshonq against them, and it's specifically saying that they came and they took the treasures out of the house of the Lord and from the palace, etc. Is there any evidence? I know, like in the Assyrians, like they talked about what they took and who they took it from. Is there any evidence in the Egyptian records as to the results of these campaigns? I know in the past they said they just kind of wiped out people, but they never really mentioned, any treasures being taken. Is there any example of any evidence to suggest that any type of the looting of holy sites or palaces was done by the Egyptians against any other peoples?
The Egyptians, no, I haven't seen any. The Assyrians, yes. But the Egyptians, the Hittites, yes. Egyptians, no, I haven't seen it. Not with Sheshonq the First. If it's available, I haven't seen it, no. Because I would show why he was campaigning. It wasn't for the wealth. So these are the facts. These are the facts. Jerusalem was a poor and small highland settlement without massive constructions. In the time of Sheshonq the First, Judah was still a marginal, sparsely settled southern highland political entity ruled from a small settlement. It's not this huge thing that it's been painted to be in the 10th century. And then the poor material culture of Judah around this time leaves no room to imagine great wealth in that temple. And like I said, there was certainly not wealth magnificent enough to appease Sheshonq the First to campaign against Judah. Not at all. So the evidence renders the biblical description of the events in the 5th year of Rehoboam highly unlikely or highly problematic. You can move the dates on the Egyptian side back and forth, no problem. We don't know whether he started in the early years of his reign or the later years of his reign, no problem. But when we get on the ground, when we look at the place names, compare it with the place names we have from the late Bronze Age, we can date it to the Iron Age. The 10th century, Judah wasn't doing that well. Judah didn't have this wealth that the text is saying that he carried all the treasures of the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and the treasures of the royal palace. I beg to differ. And we don't see Jerusalem or any of the Judean highlands, any cities there, mentioned in the list. We see an extensive list of the north. So these facts makes us look at this narrative and say what really is going on. And what we can conclude is the hand of the Deuteronomistic writer all over this here. With this explanation, now we're going to move on and see what his campaign really was about. Before that, comments, contributions, questions, before I move on.